Here's what's coming up on today's programme. A practice rescue exercise at Rivington Pike by North West Emergency Services. One woman's mission to stop her baby from getting a disability.
I've done really well. I've still struggled from a disability perspective. And we had a conversation about how we wouldn't want our child to go through what I go through.
Two sisters reunited during lockdown.
The most important thing is that we've connected, that we can grow into a new chapter and become beautiful best friends, which we have. And it still makes me emotional now, like.
And George Bate will be here with the weather. Hello and welcome to Salford Now. I'm Shauna Burns. So what happens when someone goes missing? The North West Logistical Response Team annually carries out a rigorous training exercise to prepare for the scenario. Emily Nolan went to Rivington Pike to find out more.
It's a Saturday night, yet these lights are not from a nightclub. On this snowy hill in the Northern Moors, a group of volunteers set out to rescue two missing females. This was treated as a real-life scenario with only a few of the organisers knowing that it was a training exercise. Neil Howard, an electrical engineer and chief executive officer of the team, organised the event.
So we've set this up from nothing, just to support the services in these times of need.
Here I am alongside the volunteers of the Greater Manchester Response Team, where tonight they've carried out a search and rescue procedure.
This is my first activity, yeah, so they kept quite a lot of secrets.
So today we've had two missing females. The original call come through at 2 o'clock through to our control room, and then we've dispatched units throughout the day.
The command unit, the Mobile HQ, is the first on scene. Responders are then called to the last place the missing people were known to be. Usually, 3 or 4 teams are involved. Once the missing people are located, paramedics can then be called. They are then taken back to the scene to be checked over.
So all the guys are volunteers, they're all on standby, and we need to make sure that they're trained up and they're prepared for any eventuality.
The group have helped people with emergencies such as the Moors fires, floodings, and helped to deliver PPE through the pandemic.
Every single person here gets excited because they have the opportunity to go out and help.
With snow and the weather getting really bad, it's perfect for us to train as much as we can just to give our responders the best possible scenario. So basically, if you're going to come out, make sure you prepare, make sure you tell people where you're going, make sure you get enough supplies.
Volunteers such as you and Adair enjoyed the exercise.
It's been brilliant. We've got out into the hills of Rivington on a quite a frosty evening, and it was lovely.
However, this was only a training session. The reality is, every 90 seconds someone is reported missing in the UK. The volunteers encourage people to stay safe during the darker months by taking the necessary precautions. Emily Nolan, Salford Now.
Now, it's not every day that you receive a message on Facebook from someone claiming to be your sister. Well, for Beulah Israel, that's exactly what happened. Olivia Mullally has more.
We have the same mouth, we have the same nose, and our expressions. And I was like, this, oh my gosh, this is my sister.
What are the odds of finding your long-lost sister during a global pandemic? Well, for Beulah Israel, the physical similarities were too obvious when she got a Facebook message from Yishra in May. The two share a father, who they are now estranged from.
Because my dad was quite abusive, we had a lot of trouble from social services. So he left a social service report on the stairs. I saw that he'd been married before my mum and that he had had 2 kids. They only mentioned one name, and that was Beulah.
Beulah did feel sceptical at first, but found herself connecting with Yishra over their similar childhood experiences.
For her to even share her story is a very, very brave thing, because she experienced for 20 years of her whole entire life, you know, being homeschooled, having no contact with other people until she was even allowed to volunteer at a charity shop, and then slightly come out, you know, a very cult version. but there's also that positivity that comes out of it, like that we have that togetherness and that home.
The sisters met in person in August and planned to meet again in October, but lockdown restrictions mean they remain 200 miles apart. But this won't stop their relationship from growing.
The most important thing is that we've connected, that we can grow into a new chapter and become beautiful best friends, which we have, and it still makes me emotional now, like
The pandemic may be separating families right now, but in a few weeks, the sisters will be able to meet again and celebrate Christmas for the first time in Beulah's house.
Dad didn't believe in Christmas, so I never really celebrated it when I was younger. This would have been my first Christmas on my own, so it is quite a relief that I can, spend it with someone I can call my family,
Sale Sharks have parted company with Director of Rugby Steve Diamond after 10 years in the role. Our sports editor Aaron Diskin joins me. Aaron, what's the latest?
So, like you say, Shauna, the news today comes as a bit of a shock because Steve Diamond has been involved with the club for approximately 20 years, both on the playing side and the coaching side. So for him to leave and cite personal circumstances as the reason will come as a bit as a surprise to the fans. He leaves the club currently fourth in the Gallagher Premiership after the first 3 games. They've won 2 and lost 1, and Paul Deacon will take over the first team affairs while the search for a new head coach gets underway. Speaking on the departure, Diamond said that after 10 proud years he felt like it was time for somebody to take over and take the club to a new level. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Aaron. No. A woman in Salford is undergoing special medical treatment to prevent her future child from inheriting her disability. Liam McAleen spoke to Kay Ashton about the process.
On a mission to be a parent, and I also have a disability.
That's Kay Ashton, who lives with a genetic condition called neurofibromatosis. The condition causes tumours to grow on your nerve endings. It has caused mobility problems for Kay, but she has not let this stop her dream of becoming a parent.
We were going to go for children, and because I've got a genetic disability and how even though I've done really well, I've still struggled from a disability perspective. And we had a conversation about how we wouldn't want our child to go through what I go through. And there's no say if that could happen. I could have given birth and the child could be perfectly fine, no problems. It could have been 50-50. So they might not even have the condition. But it was something as a couple we didn't want to happen. So we did some research and found out about PGD.
Pre-implantation genetic testing is a treatment which involves checking the genes or chromosomes of your embryos for a specific genetic condition.
I thought, I'll go ahead on my own, but I'll give it a little while. And I give it 2 years. And then I've spoken to my doctors last year and I said, I'm ready now, I want to go solo and do it with a sperm donor instead.
For the PGD, like what's that process been like for you? Has it been tough?
So far, the process has been okay. Is that I guess because I've not had a lot of needles yet, it's not been too bad. It's been more checking that I'm psychologically well enough to have a child, checking in with my medical team, because it is a child is a lifelong thing. It's with the child's there with you forever, and the hospital signing the paperwork and me going through this process, they need to ensure the best for the child as well.
It is this whole process, it's a lot to go through by yourself anyway, but how has the coronavirus impacted that?
Hell of a lot. Like where before it was like 1 year to an 18-month process just for an embryo transfer, now you're looking at 18 months to 2 years, and it's more towards the 2-year mark. So I'm 30 now. I had my first appointment just after my 30th birthday. So, 32 before I transfer? So I'd be like 33 if I'm lucky first time.
While COVID has slowed down the process, Kay does see the situation as a blessing in order to prepare and to make sure she is in a stable condition. Kay's journey can be followed on her podcast, Love, Life and Disability. Lee McAleen for Salford Now.
It may be getting colder, but there's no better time to get out into nature. In an exclusive poll for Salford Now, 73% of residents think the city is industrial, when in reality Salford is more green space than Bristol and Brighton. George Bate explores some of the Salford's hidden wildlife.
Salford is no longer that dirty old town. The city hides more green space than many people realise and is no longer the industrial city described in Ewan McCall's famous song.
With winter quickly approaching, it's getting even colder outside, but that isn't stopping many Salford citizens from getting out and about. Many people don't realise, but over 60% of Salford is actually green space, including here at the Kersal Wetlands. So it's no better time for residents to explore their local area.
Being out in nature has been proven to reduce stress, lower blood pressure, boost immune systems and lower levels of depression. The mental health charity Mind published a report that stated 71% of people suffering from depression felt a decrease in their symptoms. David Marsden is a volunteer Salford Ranger who has recently discovered his local green spaces in the lockdowns and credits them with keeping his mental health in check.
Now, I didn't really probably say I'd appreciated the wildlife in Salford as much as I should have. I mean, when I moved here, I just had this vision of a grey concrete area, really, with nothing much to offer. Probably it's only about 4 years ago then I discovered Peel Park. It was only just over the road. And, oh, this is a nice place, but when you're busy with one thing and another, I never really got to appreciate it or anything that was further afield in Salford. But if I'm in for too long, that affects my mood. I need to be a person that gets out each day. I'm not one of these people that wants to sit on the settee every day just watching Netflix, and I do that, but not every day, and it certainly doesn't make me happy. So just to actually get out out in the fresh air and into nature has helped me.
Salford's green spaces are a largely underappreciated part of the city. With lockdown looking likely throughout the winter, there's no better time for Salford to rediscover its hidden gems. George Bate for Salford Now.
Now, if you've ever wandered the streets of Salford, you'll know the name Langworthy. But the story of the Langworthy family stretches beyond the borders of our city. Here, George Langworthy is known as the nephew of a mill owner, but in Spain he's known as the Englishman of the Peseta. A new book telling his remarkable story, as I've been finding out.
He was a saint. They think of him as a saint because of what he did for the local poor people.
This is George Langworthy. To Salford, he's the nephew of the former mayor, Edward Langworthy. But to the Costa del Sol, he's the Englishman of the Peseta. George is now the subject of a new book written by Mike Shapton.
He's known on the Costa del Sol for two different things. The first is that, the man was quite wealthy, but he ended up giving away his fortune. Torremolinos, when George was there, was a simple little fishing village. And the people who lived there either made a living from fishing or from working the land thereabouts. Especially if there was no success fishing that day, a family would be hungry because they lived a pretty hand-to-mouth existence.
George became a Christian Scientist after his wife passed away and dedicated himself to supporting the locals of Torremolinos. He gave away all of his fortune until he had nothing left for himself, which led to the renovation of his home.
He handed over the running of the estate to his staff, but of course he had no money to pay them, and they had to find a way to make a living and maintain the estate. So at that point, they turned it into a hotel. And effectively, it was the first hotel on what we now call the Costa del Sol.
This is what remains of his uncle Edward's legacy in Salford. Him and his brothers owned a mill which gave jobs to people in the area.
In 1840, a firm was formed called Langworthy Brothers. They operated Greengate Mills, which stood on the banks of the River Irwell.
It's not entirely clear whereabouts the Greengate Mill stood in Salford, though what we do know is that in 2011, over 40 tonnes of stone left over from the mill was recovered from the River Irwell, including this Greengate Mill sign. It's not quite the Costa del Sol, but the Langworthy legacy will live on in the Costa del Salford. Shauna Burns, Salford Now. Jake Myers and Darren Bailey from Earlham in Salford are organising a 16-mile march to raise funds for cerebral palsy.
I think when people look at a little girl in a wheelchair, or any child or adult in a wheelchair, I think they just assume that all these things are provided for them, and it's just not the case at all.
And here's George Bate with the weather.
The weather forecast is very easy for this week. It's rain, rain and more rain. On Wednesday and Thursday, it's looking a bit cloudy with a few showers, but on Friday and Saturday, you better take your brollies out. Back to you in the studio, where I wish I was right now.
Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Salford Now for more news. Goodbye.